I hired a woman to clean the house while my entire family was out. About an hour later, she called me and whispered, "Ma'am, is there anyone else in the house?" I froze. "No, why do you ask?" "There's a woman upstairs." I started trembling. "Get out of there right now." I called the police and drove home at top speed. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of vengeance from. I want to know how far it has traveled. That day, I woke up with a plan to clean the house myself. I wanted everything to be spotless, especially before the coastal rains returned, when the humidity makes everything feel heavier and dirtier. I rolled up my sleeves, grabbed a rag, and stood in front of the living room window, ready to start with enthusiasm. As I wiped the glass, the phone in my pocket vibrated. I looked at the screen. It was Yvette, my childhood friend, whom I hadn't seen in many years. Her cheerful voice filled the phone, letting me know she would only be passing through Savannah, Georgia for one day and wanted to invite me for coffee. My heart warmed hearing her familiar voice. Yvette and I shared so many memories, running through the fields, staying up late, talking about our dreams. How could I say no? But thinking about all the cleaning I had to do, I hesitated for a moment. I couldn't leave the house like that. Then I remembered Brianna Parrish, the 20-something woman who lived in the alley near my place. She was slight, kind-natured, and needed some extra work to pay for her college classes. I called her, and she immediately accepted, grateful for the opportunity. I gave her precise instructions: clean the study, scrub the stairs to the second floor, and above all, be careful with the old dusty shelves belonging to my husband, Jerome. I left her a spare key and asked her to lock up tight when she finished. I drove to the Magnolia Tree Cafe where Yvette was waiting for me. We sat under a sprawling live oak tree. She told me about her life in the city, about her children who were already grown. I told her about Jerome, his work as a published novelist, and my tranquil, though sometimes empty days. We laughed, remembering old times. In the middle of our chat, my phone rang again. I saw the number. It was Brianna. I smiled, thinking she was calling to say she was finished, but when I answered, I didn't hear her usual shy voice. Instead, I heard agitated breathing, as if she was trying to contain a panic. "Ms. Simone," she whispered, in a shaky voice I could barely hear. "Is there anyone else in the house?" My heart stopped. "No," I replied, trying to sound calm. "I'm having coffee. My husband is at the publisher's and won't be back until tonight. What's going on, Brianna?" There were a few seconds of silence on the other end. I could only hear her ragged breathing. Suddenly, her voice broke. "There's a woman on the second floor. I was cleaning the stairs, and I saw her. She was wearing a long white dress with messy hair. She walked down the hallway and disappeared into the last room." Her words were like an ice-cold knife in my chest. I tried to stay calm, but the hand holding the phone was shaking. My first thought was that someone had broken in. The house was over 70 years old, but we always locked everything carefully. How could someone have entered? I apologized to Yvette, telling her I had an emergency. She looked at me worried, but I just shook my head, unable to explain more. I told Brianna on the phone, "Brianna, get out right now. Lock the door and wait outside. I'm on my way." I called the police while driving, my voice cracking with anxiety. I explained there was an intruder in the house, trying to provide details even though my mind was a whirlwind. I tried to call Brianna again, but she didn't answer. Every unanswered ring made my heart pound harder, as if it were trying to escape my chest. I imagined the worst, that something had happened to her, or that the intruder had attacked her. That day, the streets of Savannah seemed endless, even though I was flooring the accelerator. When I arrived home, a police cruiser was already parked in front of the door. Brianna was sitting hunched on the front step, her face pale, her eyes wide open, filled with terror. I rushed toward her, hugged her, and asked anxiously, "Are you okay? Did you see anything else?" Brianna just shook her head, her lips pressed together, as if she couldn't utter a single word. Two police officers, one middle-aged with a serious look, and a younger one, walked out of the house. They said they had checked every corner, every room, every closet, under the beds, even the backyard shed. There was no one. There were no signs of forced entry. All doors and windows were locked, without a single scratch or strange mark. I sighed with relief, but the feeling of uneasiness didn't leave me. Brianna recounted, still trembling. "I swear I saw her, Miss Simone. She didn't look real. She was like a shadow. I won't dare go up to the second floor again." I stroked her shoulder to console her, but a doubt began to grow inside me. This house was over 70 years old. It had belonged to Jerome's family before we moved in. The brick walls, the creaking wooden doors, the dark corners, they had always made me feel like they were hiding something, but I couldn't imagine a woman. Just then, I heard Jerome's sedan pull up the cobblestone driveway in front of the house. He got out, his face surprised to see the police car and me next to Brianna. I took his arm and quickly told him what happened. I expected him to be as worried as I was, to want to find out what was going on, but Jerome only smiled faintly, a smile I rarely saw. He approached Brianna, patted her shoulder, and said in a soft, almost mocking voice, "You must have been tired, honey, and confused the sun's reflection with a shadow. Our house is old. It has many corners that play tricks on the eyes." Brianna lowered her head without saying another word. I looked at her, my heart heavy. I knew she wasn't a fanciful girl. She was hard-working, honest. She had no reason to invent something like this. But Jerome's gaze, his calm, began to make me doubt myself. Maybe he was right. I apologized to the police for making them come out. A bitter embarrassment rose in my chest. I paid Brianna, asked her to go rest, and promised I would call her if I needed her. 3 months later, I officially retired. There were no more rushed mornings getting ready for work, no endless meetings, no days racing against deadlines. The old house in Savannah became my world, but the change of pace kept me awake at night. Every night I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock ticking in the darkness. During those nights, I began to notice strange sounds coming from the attic. At first they were slight noises, as if something small accidentally fell to the floor. I convinced myself it was the wind blowing through the old windows or the wood creaking due to the changing weather. But little by little, the sounds became clearer, more vivid. I heard something like a chair scraping across the floor, slow and heavy. Then light but constant footsteps, as if someone were walking back and forth. Sometimes I even heard the rustle of paper, as if someone were silently turning the pages of a book. I told Jerome one morning. As we had breakfast in the kitchen, I tried to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't help feeling uneasy. "Honey, I've been hearing noises in the attic lately. It's not the wind, it sounds like someone is up there." Jerome yawned without looking up from the newspaper in his hands. He replied distractedly, "It's just rats, Simone. Our attic is old. It's full of stuff. It's mouse paradise. I'll buy some traps tomorrow, set them, and that's that." The next day, just as he promised, Jerome brought home some large metal traps, the kind that make a loud snap when they close. He placed them at the foot of the ladder leading to the attic, right beneath the old wooden door. "There," he said, dusting off his hands. "Now you can sleep soundly, my love." Oddly, the noises disappeared completely after that. No more footsteps, no scraping chairs, no rustling paper. I sighed with relief, convincing myself that Jerome was right. Maybe it was just mice and I had worried too much. But then, strange things started happening, things impossible to ignore. One afternoon, I bought a package of spicy sausage from the local market, my favorite for its intense flavor. Jerome, on the other hand, had never liked anything spicy. He wouldn't even taste it. I carefully wrapped the sausage in paper and stored it in the refrigerator, planning to enjoy it over the weekend. The next morning, when I opened the door, I froze. A large chunk was missing. The cut was irregular, as if someone had sliced it off in a hurry. I asked Jerome, who was reading the newspaper in the living room, "Did you take some of the sausage from the refrigerator?" He looked up, frowning as if my question was absurd. I felt like trying something spicy yesterday, so I cut off a little piece," he replied distractedly. "It was good, actually." I stood motionless, unsure what to say. Jerome had never tolerated spicy food. He even complained when I cooked something with too much seasoning. But I didn't want to argue, so I just nodded and walked away. A doubt lodged in my chest. A few days later, the sausage had disappeared entirely. I rummaged through the refrigerator, checked the trash, but found no trace. This time, I didn't ask Jerome anything. An uncomfortable feeling, like a block of ice, began to settle within me. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Jerome and I drove to Charleston, South Carolina to visit some old friends. We left early in the morning and returned late at night. When we entered, the house was as silent as always. I went upstairs to the second-floor bathroom to wash my face and shake off the day's fatigue. But as I stepped inside, I felt something cold and damp. The floor was soaked. Water seeped between my sandals, icy cold. The floor was completely wet, as if someone had just taken a shower. I looked around and saw drops still sliding down the shower walls, shining under the light. My heart hammered loudly. No one had been home all day. How was this possible? I called for Jerome, my voice trembling. "Come here, please. The bathroom is soaked, like someone took a bath." He entered, looked for a moment, and shrugged. "It must have been the afternoon rain that came in through the ceiling vent, my love." I looked out the window. The street in front of the house was dry under the streetlights. "It hasn't rained, Jerome," I said, trying to sound calm. He frowned, slightly annoyed. "Then it must be a leak in the old pipes. You always worry about nothing. I'll call a plumber tomorrow." But he never called a plumber. In the following days, the bathroom floor was dry, as if nothing had happened. I checked the ventilation grate and the pipes, but everything seemed normal. Jerome's explanation, though reasonable, failed to erase the feeling of unease that was growing inside me. The noises in the attic, the disappeared sausage, the puddle of water with no apparent source. It all seemed like unconnected fragments, but when put together, they formed a contradictory image I couldn't stop thinking about. A week later, I decided to clean Jerome's study. It was his pride, a small room on the second floor with dusty oak bookshelves filled with hundreds of books and old documents. I always thought that someday we should donate some of the books we rarely read to the city library so they could reach the hands of those who needed them. That day, I stood in the middle of the room, starting to classify the books on Jerome's desk. There were piles of drafts, notes, and papers stacked chaotically, as if he never intended to organize them. When I lifted a heavy stack, my hand shook, and all the papers spilled onto the floor. The sound of the paper falling broke the silence in the room and made me jump. I bent down to pick them up, and right at that moment, a small wooden drawer that had been stuck for years sprang open with a dry click. I hesitated for an instant and looked inside the drawer. There, beneath a pile of yellowed drafts, was a small, hardback notebook with a dark brown leather cover and worn corners. It looked old. It didn't seem to belong to Jerome. He always liked modern, neat things, laptops, pens, and immaculate white sheets. That notebook with the worn leather cover and a loose cord seemed to be from another era. With a mix of curiosity and dread, I took it in my trembling hands and opened the first page. Inside were pages full of handwritten letters. The calligraphy was soft, elegant, clearly a woman's. I flipped through the pages, skimming them. They were story outlines, character descriptions, plot ideas. There was a fragment that spoke of a small town on the side of a mountain where a woman lived alone, waiting for someone who would never return. Another mentioned a buried secret with details that made my skin crawl. These ideas, although distinct, had a similar air to the plots of Jerome's most famous novels, the ones that gave him his renown. My heart hammered, my throat dry. It couldn't be a coincidence. I know Jerome too well. He hates writing by hand. He always said it was slow and messy, a waste of time. Everything of his, from novel drafts to work notes to shopping lists, he did on the computer. I remember once when I asked him to jot down a restaurant address, and instead of taking the pen next to him, he turned on the computer to write it. So whose notebook was this? A secret collaborator's? An admirer's gift? I sat in the chair with the notebook weighing heavily in my hands. Part of me wanted to show it to Jerome as soon as he returned. I wanted to hear his explanation, but I hesitated. I know him too well. Jerome always knows how to make everything sound logical. He would smile. He would say it was a gift from a reader or an old idea from when he tried to write by hand, and I, as many times before, would nod and let everything sink into silence, but not this time. I didn't want to let it go. Carefully, I put the notebook back in the drawer and pushed it all the way to the back, as if afraid it would disappear if I didn't keep it hidden. That night, I was sleepless again. Lying in bed, I watched the ceiling and listened to the clock ticking in the dark. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, a slight creaking sound came from the hallway. It was a small noise, but in the silence of the night, it was clearly audible, like an unsettling whisper. I sat up abruptly, my heart racing, out of control. I don't know why, but I immediately thought of the small door leading to the attic, the one Jerome and I almost never opened. I got up carefully without turning on the light, afraid that the brightness would shatter the truth I was about to discover. The faint moonlight entered through the window, just enough for me to see a crack. The attic door was ajar. A cold, damp draft descended, bringing with it the smell of old paper and stale air. I stood motionless, my feet glued to the floor. Fear, mixed with curiosity, paralyzed me. I went back to the room and gently shook my husband's shoulder. "Jerome, wake up! The attic door is open!" Jerome groaned half asleep and got up with an irritated gesture. He put on his slippers and walked in front of me down the hallway without saying a word. But when we arrived, the door was closed, the latch firmly in place, as if no one had touched it. I stood there staring, looking for any sign. A scratch? A crack? Nothing. Jerome turned to me with an expression of tiredness and disappointment. "Simone," he said in a grave, exhausted tone, "you've been too tense lately. You aren't sleeping well. That's why you see things that don't exist. Come back to bed now." He walked me back. I lay down, but kept my eyes wide open, fixed on the ceiling. For the first time, I began to doubt myself, wondering if I had truly imagined everything. In the following days, since I found the mysterious notebook, I tried to keep everything normal, although the unease consumed me internally. I began to notice Jerome's every gesture, every look, every word. Lately, he had acquired a new habit that only increased my suspicions. Around 10 o'clock at night, when I was already in bed with a book in my hands, ready to sleep, he would say he had to continue working in the study. "I need to concentrate a little, Simone," he would usually say in a soft but firm voice. "The manuscript is at a complicated part. You go to sleep first." I would nod, smiling, but every time the study door closed, I felt an invisible distance opening further between us. One night, I woke up thirsty. The clock on the table showed almost 1 o'clock in the morning, and the second hand seemed to be counting something in the darkness. I reached out to touch Jerome, but the bed was empty, the sheets cold, as if he had never been there. My heart leaped. A sensation of disquiet ran through my body. Where was he? I put on a thin robe and went out into the hallway, thinking he might have fallen asleep at the desk, as he did sometimes when the pressure from the publisher exhausted him. I walked down the dark hallway. The faint light from the living room projected strange shadows on the walls. I pushed open the study door, but the room was empty. The computer screen was off, the chair perfectly placed beneath the desk, as if no one had been there. I called out softly, "Jerome?" My voice echoed in the silence, but there was no answer. I went down to the kitchen, thinking he might have gone for water, but it was also empty. Only the moonlight entered through the window, making the shadows of the plates on the shelves look like ghosts. I started walking through the house, calling his name, my voice growing shakier. My heart pounded hard, as if sensing that I was about to confront something. As I passed the staircase leading to the second floor, I heard a very soft step, almost imperceptible if I hadn't been paying attention. I looked up, and under the dim hallway light, I saw a silhouette slowly descending. It was Jerome. He was barefoot, walking carefully, as if he didn't want to make the slightest noise. In his hand, he carried a porcelain plate, the kind we used for weekend dinners. When he saw me there, his eyes widened. An expression of surprise crossed his face. The plate slipped from his hands, fell onto the stone floor with a sharp clank, and shattered into pieces. That sound tore through the silence of the night, startled me, and I took a step back. I looked at the fragments, confused. The plate was empty, clean, with no traces of food or grease, as if it had been carefully washed. That only increased my bewilderment. I looked up at Jerome and asked in a trembling voice, "What were you doing up there at this hour? I thought you were in the study." He bent down and began picking up the pieces with slow movements, as if trying to buy time to think of an answer. He avoided my gaze and said in a forced tone, I got stuck on the end of the book. The editor won't stop pressuring me, you know. I needed a quiet place, so I went upstairs for a while. I got hungry and went up with some food." I stood there, watching him pick up the pieces, unable to fully believe him. I knelt to help him. When our fingers brushed on the cold floor, I felt a shiver of distance. That hand that once gave me comfort now chilled my skin. I knew he was under a lot of pressure from the publisher. The constant calls from Mr. Sterling, his editor, kept him tense. Maybe, I told myself, he just needed space to write. Maybe I was overreacting. The next morning, the house was heavy, as if an invisible cloud floated above us. I woke up tired, my head full of unanswered doubts. Jerome, avoiding looking at me, got up earlier than usual. I heard him silently preparing coffee, the soft clinking of the porcelain, but without the usual "good morning." He locked himself in the study, closing the door firmly, and I knew he didn't want interruptions. I stayed in the hallway, looking at that wooden door with a heavy heart. Near noon, Jerome emerged, dressed in a gray suit and carrying a small suitcase. He paused in the living room, where I was sitting with a cup of cold tea. "I need to go away for a few days," he said in a flat, emotionless voice. "Maybe I'll go to Atlanta. I need a change of scenery for inspiration." I looked up, surprised. Jerome never left without warning. He always planned everything in advance. He consulted the itinerary with me. "Why so suddenly?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though my heart was pounding. He didn't look at me directly. His eyes were fixed on the window, where the sunlight filtered through the dusty panes. "The idea just came to me suddenly," he replied monotonously. "Be careful while I'm gone." But just before walking out the door, he suddenly turned and placed his hands on my shoulders. His grip was stronger than usual, making me jump. "Simone," he said in a low, serious tone, "while I'm away, don't let anyone in. Do you hear me? Especially no one from the publishing house. If Mr. Sterling, my editor, comes looking for me, tell him I went on a trip and that you don't know when I'll be back." I nodded, but a feeling of unease grew inside me. His words didn't sound like a simple warning, but an order, an alert. Jerome had been gone for about 2 hours when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Mr. Sterling, Jerome's editor, next to a young assistant. Both looked impatient. I hesitated for a moment, my hand on the doorknob, feeling my chest flutter. Jerome's words echoed in my head, but I couldn't stay here without answering. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and forced a smile. Mr. Sterling didn't wait for me to invite him in. He walked straight into the living room with an annoyed expression. "Ms. Whitlock," he said in a harsh voice, "I know Jerome is home. Stop covering for him. We need the manuscript urgently. The deadline was 2 weeks ago." Keeping my composure, I repeated exactly what Jerome had asked me to say. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, but Jerome left this morning to seek inspiration. I don't know when he'll return." Mr. Sterling let out an ironic laugh that chilled my blood. He pointed toward the Hamiltons' house, our neighbors across the street. "Don't lie to me anymore," he said sharply. "Mr. Hamilton told me he sees the attic light on until very late every night. If Jerome is working that hard, he should have the manuscript ready, not hiding like this." The young assistant, a girl with kind eyes, intervened. "Ma'am, we just want to help. If Mr. Jerome is going through writer's block, he should talk to us. We can support him." Her tone was gentle, but I could no longer concentrate. Mr. Sterling's words struck me hard. The attic light. I had never noticed that. We almost never went up there. It was full of old boxes and cobwebs. Why would a light be on? And why did Mr. Hamilton say he saw it every night? My heart seemed to stop. I tried to maintain my composure as I walked them to the door, promising to notify Jerome as soon as I had news. But as I closed the door, I leaned against it, trembling. My mind raced. The scattered fragments began to fit together. The noises in the attic, the piece of sausage that disappeared, the puddle in the bathroom, the mysterious notebook, the empty plate, and now the light. It all pointed to the same place. The attic, that forgotten space I hadn't been in for years. I no longer felt fear. Instead, a cold determination began to grow inside me, like a silent flame that pushed me to discover the truth. I went to the backyard shed, where a faint light from the street lamp filtered through the crack in the door. The smell of dust and old oil made me cough. I looked for the old folding ladder that we hadn't used since we moved in. It was heavy, covered in dust and cobwebs, as if time had left it behind. I dragged the ladder down the second-floor hallway, each step weighing me down, as if I were carrying all the accumulated suspicions. When I placed it under the hatch leading to the attic, I felt my heart pounding hard, but not from fear. It was an urgency, a certainty that I was about to discover something that would change everything. The metal latch was rusty, so stiff that I had to use all my strength, grit my teeth, and push hard until it gave way. The metal made a sharp click like a final warning. I lifted the hatch door, and a suffocating, damp current of air descended, bringing with it the smell of old paper and years of confinement. That smell turned my stomach, but I didn't stop. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The cold white light cut through the darkness. I took a deep breath and climbed up. Each rung creaked beneath my feet, as if guiding me toward a world I wasn't prepared for. The attic was larger than I imagined. A dark space full of stacked cardboard boxes, old furniture covered with dusty white sheets, and cobwebs hanging like ghostly curtains. The only light came from a small, dirty window, leaving opaque beams on the wooden floor. I swept the flashlight across the entire space. My heart was beating so fast, it felt like it would jump out of my chest. In the farthest corner of the attic, there was a small, organized space, like an oasis in the middle of the chaos. A wooden table, a chair with a broken leg, and an oil lamp dimly lit, casting a yellowish, almost dying light. And then I saw her, a woman sitting with her back to me. She was thin, with long, white, tangled hair falling over her shoulders like a forgotten cascade. She wore a yellowed white dress with torn edges. The sound of the pencil scratching the paper was the only thing breaking the silence, like a faint heartbeat of life. I stood paralyzed. My throat closed, unable to utter a word. I stammered, "Who? Who is there?" My voice sounded weak, swallowed by the darkness. The pencil stopped. The woman turned her head abruptly. Under the faint lamplight, her gaunt, pale face appeared. Her eyes were sunken, tired, but with something familiar that made me tremble. My world collapsed. My legs gave out, and I had to lean against an old trunk not to fall. It was Alana, my sister, the face I hadn't seen in 30 years, only in dreams and blurry photos. Alana, whom the entire family believed lost forever, was there in the attic of my house, in a state that broke my soul. Around her was a small world of secret existence, a huge stack of handwritten manuscripts, several empty cans, rolling water bottles, a dirty blanket on a thin mattress, and an old bucket for her necessities. Everything was living proof of a life in captivity. Alana looked at me, her dry lips trembling. She tried to speak, her voice hoarse, as if she had forgotten how. "Sister Simone." She couldn't say more. She just looked at me with eyes full of tears, as if begging for a forgiveness I didn't yet understand. I no longer heard anything. Hot tears welled up and ran down my cheeks. I walked toward her like a sleepwalker, my legs shaking, my head spinning. Alana, my sister, the one I had cried for until my soul was dry, thinking I had lost her forever. Now she was here, alive, like a ghost inside my own home. I took her thin arm. I felt every fragile bone beneath her skin. "Come downstairs to the living room," I said between sobs, my voice broken. "Come down now, Alana." I helped her stand up. A storm of emotions raged inside me. Joy at finding her, pain at seeing her like this, and fear of the questions screaming in my head. Why was she here? Who had done this to her? And Jerome? What did he have to do with it? I guided her down the stairs. Her every step was unsure, as if her legs didn't remember what it was like to leave that dark attic. The light of the house illuminated her face, highlighting her sunken features and narrowed eyes, unaccustomed to the glare. She looked like a creature of the dark, seeing the sun for the first time, and that broke my heart. Alana, my sister, who once shone like the Savannah sun, was now nothing more than a fragile shadow. I led her to the living room. I carefully sat her down in the most comfortable armchair, where the soft light of a lamp fell upon her like a caress. I rushed to the kitchen, filled a glass with cold water, and with trembling hands brought it to her. Alana tried to hold it, but her hands shook so much that the water spilled. I knelt down, held the glass, and helped her drink, sip by sip. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. I didn't want her to see me weak. She needed me to be strong, at least for now. After a few sips, Alana began to cry. It wasn't a soft cry. It was a silent scream, as if all the years of repressed pain were erupting at once. She collapsed onto my shoulder. Her thin body shook, and I could only hold her tight, feeling every vertebra through her clothes. I didn't ask her anything. I just stayed there in silence, letting her cry, letting the tears carry away some of the weight she had carried for so long. When Alana finally calmed down, she began to speak, her voice broken, barely a whisper. "Sister Simone," she murmured, looking at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. "I never thought I would see you again, especially not like this." I took her hand, squeezing it gently, trying to convey some warmth. "Tell me, Alana," I said, my voice firm yet tender. "What happened? Why are you here?" Then she began to tell me, every word of hers like a stab. She spoke of that fateful night 30 years ago when her life fell apart. Darren Albright, her editor at the publishing house, had summoned her to his apartment to discuss work. Alana, naive and young, believed him. But when she arrived, Darren was drunk. His gaze was no longer that of a boss, but of a predator. He tried to force himself on her, his voice loaded with menace. Alana defended herself with all her strength. She pushed him, but he didn't stop. In the midst of the struggle, she, panicked, grabbed a small marble statue and hit him in the head. "Sister, I just wanted him to stop," she said, her voice choked. I didn't want that to happen." But the blow was too strong. Darren fell to the floor, hitting his head against the coffee table, and lay motionless, showing no signs of life. Alana recounted that she was paralyzed, not knowing what to do, her mind blank with fear. Just then, Jerome appeared. He said he was just passing by to invite her to dinner at our house, but upon entering, he witnessed the entire terrifying scene. "I wanted to call the police, sister," Alana said, her eyes red. "I wanted to turn myself in, do the right thing, but Jerome wouldn't let me." He stood there, looking at her with chilling calm. "You'll go to prison, Alana," he said in a cold voice. "You'll lose your whole life. Let me help you. For Simone, I'll protect you." I listened, my body cold. Jerome, the husband I loved, whom I trusted, had manipulated my sister, using my own love for him. He convinced Alana that hiding the truth was the only way to protect me, to prevent our family from bearing the shame. That night, taking advantage of the darkness and isolation of the low-country woods near the Ogeechee River, Jerome carried Darren's body in his car. He quickly dug a grave on the hillside in a place no one knew and buried the secret there. Then he brought Alana to our house when I was already asleep and hid her in the attic. "It will only be temporary," he told her, "until everything calms down." But temporary turned into 30 years. Jerome turned Alana into a ghost, living in secret in her own sister's house. When the police investigated, they discovered that Darren had withdrawn a large sum of money before he disappeared. Jerome skillfully spread the rumor that Alana and Darren were having an affair and had run away together. That story, coupled with both of their disappearances, made everyone, even me, believe it was true. The investigation stalled, and Alana, in the eyes of the world, became a fugitive who abandoned her family. I stood there, tears streaming down my cheeks, but not from sadness. It was rage. It was the pain of betrayal. I remembered the days after Alana's disappearance, when I cried until I had no strength left, when our mother aged overnight from grief. I remembered Jerome's sudden literary career, his successful novels, the wealth and fame we achieved, all of it built upon my sister's pain and sacrifice. "I didn't know, Alana," I whispered, my voice broken. "I didn't know anything. I trusted him." "The first few years in the attic were hell, sister," Alana continued in a hoarse voice, her gaze lost as if reliving those dark days. "I lived with fear, guilt, and an unbearable loneliness. Every night, I dreamed the police were coming for me, or worse, that I was trapped forever in the darkness." She paused, breathing shakily. To keep from going insane, I started writing. I wrote about the stories I dreamed, about worlds where I could be free, where I wasn't a shadow. I listened, feeling every word like a stab. I imagined Alana, the vibrant young woman she once was, hunched in that cold attic, clinging to the pencil like the last spark of hope. "And one day," she continued, "Jerome found my writings. I thought he would encourage me, tell me to save them for myself. But no, sister. His eyes shone as if he had discovered a treasure. He said, 'Alana, you have talent. Write for me. I will be your voice to the world.'" I was paralyzed. My head was spinning. I remembered that time when Jerome suddenly announced he was quitting his accounting job at the newspaper to pursue his passion for writing. Friends and family were surprised because he had never shown interest in literature before. I felt proud of him, thinking he had found a creative spark I never imagined. But now, the truth was like a slap in the face. Jerome wasn't a writer. He was a thief who had stolen Alana's talent, turning her into a ghostwriter, a ghost in the most literal sense, locked inside my own house. Alana continued, her voice trembling but filled with bitterness. "Many times I wanted to stop, turn myself in to the police. I couldn't bear the guilt, the feeling of living a life that wasn't mine. But every time I said it, Jerome threatened me. He said that if I turned myself in, you would be the one to suffer the most. He said you couldn't withstand the blow of knowing your sister had committed a crime and that your husband was her accomplice. He said you would lose everything, your family, your reputation, everything you love." I bit my lip. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Alana's words tore at my heart. Jerome had used my love and Alana's love for me to manipulate her, to keep her in the dark. I covered my face, trying to contain the sobs. "Forgive me, Alana," I whispered, my voice broken. "I didn't know. I never imagined that—" But Alana shook her head. She took my hands, and her thin fingers squeezed them hard, as if trying to pull me out of the pain. "Don't apologize, sister," she said. "I let him manipulate me too. I was afraid. I believed that doing what he said was the only way to protect you." She recounted that living like that in secret had become increasingly difficult, especially since I retired and spent more time at home. Before, because I left early and came back late and went to sleep right after dinner to have energy the next day, I never noticed. "That's why I had to shower quickly when you two were out," she said, looking down. "That's why I had to steal food from the refrigerator at night. I tried not to leave traces, but sometimes I was clumsy, like the puddle of water in the bathroom or the piece of sausage you bought." Suddenly, I remembered all those strange details, signals that I had chosen to ignore. Now everything made sense, but it was a sense too painful to accept. I thought about Jerome's novels that I had read and admired. I had always wondered why the setting seemed so old, so nostalgic, as if time had stopped decades ago. The characters didn't use cell phones. The internet didn't exist. They wrote letters. They waited in vain like lost souls. Now I understood. It wasn't a literary style. It was because Alana's world had truly stopped 30 years ago. She was trapped in the past. She could only write about what she knew. Those stories of two people who never managed to find each other were a reflection of her own tragedy, a life separated from the outside world. Alana took my hands, her eyes filled with tears. "Sister Simone," she said with a trembling but firm voice, "I can't live like this anymore. I have paid for my mistake for 30 years in this prison. Now, I want to face real justice. I want to turn myself in." Her words were like a final stab, cutting the last threads of hope I had left. I had lost her once when I thought she had run far away. I didn't want to lose her again, but looking into her eyes, I knew it was what she needed. Liberation, the truth, no matter how painful. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I nodded, squeezing her hand tightly. "Okay, Alana," I said, my voice catching. "I'll take you to the police station. We will face everything together." I hugged her, feeling her fragile body in my arms. My heart was full of pain, but there was also a small spark, the hope that though late, I could still help her regain her freedom. The next morning, I dressed Alana in one of my clean outfits. The dress was too big for her thin body, but at least it made her look more presentable. We hadn't slept all night. I sat next to her in the living room, telling her how the world had changed, the tall buildings, the smartphones everyone was glued to, and the loved ones who were no longer with us. Alana only listened in silence, her gaze lost, as if trying to imagine a world that had been stolen from her. I drove to the Central Police Department with Alana seated beside me. She was hunched in the passenger seat, her hands clasped together, her eyes fixed on the window, like a stranger seeing an unknown planet for the first time. "Everything has changed too much," she whispered, amazed at seeing the electric cars pass or children taking photos with their phones. I took her hand and squeezed it gently, trying to give her some courage. "I'm here, Alana," I said with a trembling voice. "We're going to get through this together." At the police department, I asked to speak directly with the head of detectives. At first, they refused, saying we needed an appointment. But when I mentioned the disappearance of Alana Whitlock, which occurred 30 years ago, their attitude changed completely. An officer led us to an interrogation room, a small room with gray walls and an icy metal table. With my help, Alana began to tell her story. Her voice was clear and serene, as if she had rehearsed those words 1,000 times in her mind. She spoke of that fateful night, of Darren, of the accidental blow that took his life, and of how Jerome hid her in the attic, turning her into a ghost for 3 decades. The police listened with disbelief. One took notes nonstop, while another spoke into the radio with an urgent tone. Alana's confession shook the entire police department. The case files were immediately reopened. An investigative team was sent to my house to search the attic and collect evidence of Alana's hidden life: the manuscripts, the food containers, the dirty blanket. Another group, following Alana's precise directions, set off for the low country woods near the Ogeechee River. After a few hours of searching, they found human remains buried beneath an old tree deep in the forest. Preliminary DNA analysis confirmed they were the remains of Darren Albright, the man everyone believed had fled with her. The arrest warrant for Jerome was issued that same day. The police set up an ambush at our house, awaiting his return from his trip to Atlanta. I wasn't there, but later, Mr. Hamilton, our neighbor, told me that Jerome offered no resistance when they handcuffed him in front of the gate. He just lowered his head, his face expressionless, as if he had always known this day would come. Hearing that, I felt a strange emptiness. The man I once loved, whom I blindly trusted, was now nothing more than a distant shadow, burdened with the secret that destroyed my entire family. I hired the best lawyer for Alana, someone who committed to fighting for her to receive clemency. With the argument of self-defense and the 30 years she spent imprisoned, manipulated by Jerome, he believed justice would see her as a victim, not a criminal. I spent all day preparing things to take to her: clean clothes, books, and the dishes she loved most as a child. I wanted her to know that no matter what, I would always be by her side. But a few days later, while I was packing things to visit her, the phone rang. A cold, formal voice spoke from the other end of the line. "Ms. Whitlock, we regret to inform you, Alana Whitlock took her own life at the detention center last night." The phone slipped from my hands and fell to the floor with a dry thud. My world shattered again. Alana, my sister, the one I had just gotten back, had chosen to leave forever, leaving me alone in a pain that had no words. She had told the truth. She had faced her past, but maybe she couldn't bear another trial or the stares of a world that doesn't forgive. The officer said Alana had left a letter for me. That afternoon, they handed it over. I held it with trembling hands, looking at her soft, familiar handwriting, the same I had seen in the attic notebook. But now it was clumsy, unstable, as if she had used her last ounce of strength to write it. I opened the letter, and tears flowed before I read the first line. "Dear Sister Simone," she wrote, "when you read this, I will truly be free. For 30 years I wrote to survive, to keep from disappearing, but I could never write under my own name. I lived as a ghost, and now it is time for that ghost to dissolve. I don't regret speaking the truth. It was the only right thing I did. Don't be sad. Think of it as I have finished the story of my life. The final manuscript is still in the attic, inside a wooden box under the table. It is the only work I wrote about myself. If you can, please let it carry the name of Lucia Whitlock." I folded the letter, hugged it to my chest, and soaked it with my tears. Lucia Whitlock, the name Alana wanted to use if she ever became a writer, the name that was stolen from her. I knew I had to fulfill her last wish. I would search for that manuscript and bring it to light so the world would know Alana's story. Not as a ghost, but as a woman, a writer, a soul who fought to be free. The trial against Jerome was held a few months later, turning into a scandal that shook the entire country. The press called it the ghostwriter of Savannah scandal. Newspapers filled their front pages with Alana's life story. A young woman locked away, stripped of her freedom, and used to build the fame of a man who didn't deserve it. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Darren's remains found in the low country woods, the manuscripts found in the attic, and Alana's testimony before her death, Jerome lowered his head and confessed. He was charged with multiple felonies: unlawful appropriation of copyrights, illegal deprivation of liberty, conspiracy to cover up a crime, and obstruction of justice. The sentence was a deserved ending, but I felt no relief. For me, Jerome had died the day I discovered the truth, the day the man I loved became a stranger. I did not attend the trial. I couldn't face him. I couldn't look into the eyes that once spoke words of love to me, but hid such a terrible secret. Instead, I returned to the house, which was once a home, but was now just a space full of painful memories. One afternoon, as the sunlight faded over the cobblestone street, I decided to go back to the attic. This time, I no longer felt fear or oppression. I climbed each rung with a flashlight in my hand, but my heart was lighter, as if I were looking for a part of Alana she had left behind. I found the wooden box under the table, just as she had written in the letter. It was a small box, old but well cared for, as if it held her last treasure. Inside was a pile of carefully handwritten manuscripts on yellowed pages. Alana's soft, fluid handwriting was clear, as if she were there, telling me her story. I carried the box down to the living room, sat under the desk light, and began to read. It was an autobiography, a novel about her own life. She wrote about our childhood, about the days running through the Savannah fields, about the dreams of being a writer she once confessed to me. She recounted the terrible night that stole her future, the 30 years lived in darkness, and the incredible strength she had not to let her soul break. Every page was a stab, but also a song of resilience, of love for life, no matter how hard. I spent weeks editing the manuscript, reviewing every line carefully, as if touching Alana's soul. There were nights when I stayed up until dawn, with tears running as I read the passages where she spoke of her loneliness in the attic, or the times she imagined being free, walking out into the sunlight. The book was not just her story, but the voice of a forgotten person, stripped of her identity. I knew I had to bring it to the world so that Alana would not just be a name in my memory, but a true writer. I contacted the publishing house that had worked with Jerome. At first they hesitated, fearful of the surrounding scandal, but when I sent Alana's manuscript, they were completely convinced. "This is a masterpiece," the editor told me over the phone, his voice full of emotion. "We will publish it, and we will do so with all the respect that Alana deserves." The book was published under her true name, Alana Whitlock. On the first page, instead of a prologue, I only wrote one sentence. No one should be imprisoned in the dark, especially if they love freedom. It was my message to her, to my dear sister, whom I loved in this world. The book became a phenomenon. Readers across America, and then the entire world, were moved by Alana's life story. They admired her literary talent, the sincerity, and the poetry in every line. Jerome's old works, now re-edited under Alana's name, also began selling again as a way to right the injustice. Alana, though gone, finally became a recognized and beloved true writer. I read the reviews, the letters from readers, and my heart felt tight yet warm. You did it, Alana, I thought. You got your voice back. Sometimes I still go up to the attic. Now it is no longer a place of confinement, but it has been cleaned and turned into a small library. I open the window to let the sunlight stream in, illuminating the shelves where Alana's works are respectfully placed. I stand there looking out at the lively street. Alana's voice has been recovered, and justice has in some way been served. I know she is somewhere, in the sunlight, in the pages of the books, and in my heart, free forever. And when everything ended, I understood something. There is no wall thick enough to enclose the truth forever. The lie, no matter how skillfully hidden, rots with time, like the dust that covers old shelves. Alana's life proves that silence can sometimes be crueler than guilt, and that fear can turn a person into a ghost within their own existence. If there is one lesson I want to leave you with, it is this: dare to face the truth, however painful it may be. Speak up, even if your voice trembles, because only when we dare to step out of the darkness are we truly free, and only when the truth is spoken can imprisoned souls finally rest. The story you have just heard has changed names and locations to protect the identity of the people involved. We are not telling it to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and pauses to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose silence to maintain the peace, or would you face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. For now, on the final screen, I will leave two of the channel's most beloved stories. I am sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.